Hello, welcome to Hat Trick. I'm Jordan Dollar Coltman. Happy Easter, happy Passover, happy whatever you and yours celebrate over the course of what is really just a wonderful weekend to be amongst friends and family. We are glad you are joining us here on this Monday. We hope you had a wonderful and restful weekend as we get sort of properly into the spring season. We've got lots to talk about this week. Braydon and Elliott are with me here. And boys, before we get going, I wanted to first check in on both of you. Did the Easter Bunny treat you well? Braydon?
Ooh. Well, I was going to say he is risen, and that, of course, I'm speaking about Mike Smith, but we can get back into that a little bit later. The Easter Bunny treated me well. It treated me well with some nice momentum for the Oilers moving into the playoffs here.
Elliott?
Yes, in that I had a very good Easter meal in which I mostly cooked, but I've perfected the glazed ham, and
nice.
And that went off without issue this week and was a big hit, big success. So really happy about that.
Love it. All right, here we go. Here's topic one. Well, Braydon, you alluded to it. Mike Smith had a wonderful weekend, back-to-back shutouts for the Edmonton Oilers. And the Edmonton Oilers are rolling in the right direction right now. We have seen a wonderful turnaround. We haven't talked about them in quite a while now. We had a lot of sleepless nights in the early part of this year when the Oilers were really struggling to put wins together. Obviously, they fired head coach Dave Tippett. Since then, Jay Woodcroft has put together a very, very solid second half of the season behind the bench for the Oilers. The big guys have been moving, both Connor and Leon, continuing what we've seen over the last few years of just putting absolutely insane points up on the board, and obviously putting both of themselves back in conversations for the Hart and for the MVP. I know they will have a hard time beating the Toronto media, who is just absolutely infatuated with Austin Matthews. We'll talk about that in a second, but let's talk about the Oilers first. They find themselves currently with 6 games remaining on the schedule, comfortably in second place. Obviously, Calgary is the first team in the division to clinch a playoff spot, thanks in part to the Oilers beating the Golden Knights on Saturday. The Kings are still very much in contention for second place, so it'll be exciting last 6 games to see how this shakes out. But as you look forward to the playoffs, which is at this point basically it's an assured thing they're going to make the playoffs. It's more a question of where they finish, unless the absolute bottom falls out. And look, we're Oiler fans; that could always happen. But at this point, when you look at how the Oilers have found themselves, the form they're in, to steal a term from European soccer, how do you feel as an Oiler fan? Middle of April.
Well, I'm feeling thrilled that we find ourselves in a home ice advantage position. The momentum that I alluded to earlier as well, I think, is something that I'm excited about. And I think at this point in time, the fact that the media is more focused on another team than my own gives me some solace, knowing that pressure and attention that usually gets in the way of some sort of the way in which you see Connor and Leon affected by the media and what's going on around them, and not having that kind of attention, I think is helpful going into the playoffs. Right now it's about who are they going to face? Who would we rather face? The Kings, the Golden Knights, I was pretty afraid of. I would have said, right around the time they added Jack Eichel to the roster. And now, having seen their last game, it's nice to see that there's a system in place to be able to match up nicely against the Knights. But at the same time, both the Kings and the Knights have had a little bit of a fall off lately, and the Canucks are on a 5-game win streak. I would not hold out the idea that they could sneak in. They could very well sneak into a position to place the Oilers in the playoffs.
I don't think the Vancouver Canucks are going to make the playoffs. They basically have to run the table from here, and that's an additional 7 games. And that might not even still guarantee them in, because they've just run out of games. It's too bad, because I think the Canucks are a really exciting team, and I think there's lots of prospects for next year. But this year, that slump that they went in, and the mess that has been their team, and coaching changes and issues with ownership and GM and all that stuff has really hurt them. Good example of a team that waited too long to make a change. Edmonton almost waited too long, but they didn't. Jay Woodcroft has come in and been amazing. And what I think is sensational about this year is if you take out that 2-11-2 stretch, or that awful stretch in the middle of the season, the first 15 games and the last 20 games of the season for the Oilers, they've been one of the best teams, if not the best team in the league, which is sort of incredible. I'm kind of interested to throw it back to you guys in terms of what you think the difference is. I think the obvious answer and the simplistic answer is that they're finally getting NHL level goaltending. And that's probably the difference. Just having that kind of quality of start from their goaltending has really made a difference for this team. But maybe there's some other things as well too. Look, I'm really excited. Every day I check the standings and it's like, 6 more points. 4 more points. If this team loses, they're in. I just can't wait until the Oilers have that X beside their name, and because after that it's all gravy for me. I'm just really want to see this team in the playoffs, and hopefully finding a way to win a series or two. And just to reiterate, Braydon's point, if you had told me at the beginning of the year that Las Vegas was not likely to make the playoffs with 7 games to go in their season or 6 games to go in their season, like, I would not have believed that. And I don't think that would have been a viable thing to say. But as of today, that's where they sit right now, with a much more difficult schedule for their last 6 games than the teams that they're chasing, namely the Kings, who have a much easier schedule. So those are sort of my initial takeaways. And it's a pretty fun time of year.
Yeah, I would agree. I think one of the more impressive things when you think about how Jay Woodcroft has turned this team around is that he's done it obviously largely without many major additions. The 2 big additions, Derek Brassard and Brett Kulak, have been very valuable to the Oilers. I would argue. I think that they were, they're not flashy by any means, but they did sort of serve important pieces. Certainly the Kulak move, especially being a move that just bolstered a little bit of what we know to be a weakness for this team in the fact that the defense has been a question mark. He adds just a little bit of security, I think, back there as a more defensive guy. Braydon and Elliott, I think you both touched on goaltending. That's a huge part of this, obviously. Both Mike Smith and Koskinen are starting to play to their potential, which is nice to see. I don't know how this works in the playoffs. I think we're going to see one of them have to become the guy. Which I'm curious to see how Jay Woodcroft sort of manages that. Obviously, you go with whoever's hot, I guess. But what happens when you're in a series and it's 2-1 or something in a series and you lose that third game? Do you just throw that goaltender to the bench and go to the other guy? What if that's a loss in overtime after a really good game? Like, how do you manage the fact that you have 2 guys who expect some minutes? So that's an interesting challenge for Woodcroft. But I also really like some of the things he's done that I think are almost, kind of innovative compared to what we're seeing. The 11-7 setup here is really fascinating. It's forcing some of his depth forwards into opportunities they didn't have under Tippett. We've seen that be successful. Warren Fogel's getting a little bit hotter. We've seen some of these depth guys just get minutes they didn't have before, especially early in games. I like that. And I think it's also taken some pressure off the defense to have that extra body back there. So I think Jay Woodcroft really has been a really interesting wrinkle that has really, obviously the Oilers are playing wonderfully under him. I'm fascinated to see some of these question marks getting answered into the playoffs, and we'll see what kind of success they can have because of that.
As for the goalie dilemma, it's always very clear whether or not a goalie should play in the next game or not. Like some of those games that Koskinen just, you're not making the saves, you're not doing it, and he gets pulled or he comes out and he's not playing the next game. Like those are very, and the difference between when he does have really great games where he's making incredible saves and you can see him keeping the team in the game, but yet they still lose. There seems to be a strong difference between the Mike Smith that we saw earlier in the season to the Mike Smith that we're seeing right now. And so I do think that it is playing the hot hand and that they will continue to ride Mike. I mean, Mike Smith will likely get a rest here and they'll see how much Koskinen work can go into Koskinen before the playoffs starts. But I do think right now for me, Mike Smith is the guy going in as your 1A.
Yeah, I think that the nature of just a 7-game series and playing that way does complicate this. I think it's a lot easier to go like 1A, 1B in the regular season. When you get into the series, Well, we've seen 2 years in a row where I think the coaches started the wrong goalie to start each playoff series, and it's gone horribly. The Chicago series, and then arguably Winnipeg as well. I want to circle back to Jay Woodcroft and ask you guys a question because it's something I've been thinking a lot about. Jay Woodcroft is not under contract after this year to be an AHL coach, obviously, and he's sort of been in this sort of show me situation. Has he done enough to earn a contract in your mind right now for the Edmonton Oilers? And if not, like, how far does this run have to go before he has?
I mean, yeah, I think he has. I think when you make a mid-season coaching change, there's two sort of major evaluators you have to look at. Does the team get better under them? And then do you believe that improvement is long-term, or is it sort of a flash in the pan result of change itself? I think in this case, I think both are check marks. I think we've obviously seen the team perform better, but I think that overall the response to him behind the bench has been so dramatically impressed, like so much of a difference. It's just worked in a lot of different ways that I think it would be unfair. And I think also very, very ill-advised, as we've already seen so many new guys back there, to throw it all back up onto the whiteboard and figure out who else is available. This is a guy who's worked through your system. He knows the development players that are in your system. He's clearly put in the time to earn a spot in the NHL. If you don't sign him, he's going to go sign somewhere else after the numbers he's put up here. He will be an NHL coach next year. And if it's not for the Edmonton Oilers, then they are going to rue losing him, because I guarantee you he will find success wherever he goes right now. He's just proven that so far.
Yeah, I agree. The fact that, like what Jordan said, that there's a reason that he's been within the organization that dates back to Todd McClellan and going down and developing a lot of the players that are on the NHL roster now. And we saw this happen with Todd Nelson. I firmly believe that he should have been the head coach after that season. I think that, he had a bit of a tougher task ahead of him, but that's what they were doing. They within the system. He was, that Bakersfield team is very, very good, and that has maintained that strength. And you're seeing that productivity now in the NHL with what Jay Woodcroft's done.
I tend to agree with you guys. The only thing I would say is, one, I think you don't do it until you got that X next to your name. It's very likely that they're going to make the playoffs, but I think until they make the playoffs, he hasn't done what he's needed to do yet to have earned that contract. The only apprehension I have is, and I do agree with you, Jordan, he is very likely to end up in the NHL somewhere next year. I think he's really advantaged in the Oilers organization right now because of so many of the players that he's coaching right now. He coached in the minor leagues, and you can see people like McLeod, Yamamoto. Those are players, Puliarvi. These are players. Bouchard. These are players that he's coached in the past, and he has gotten to a place where he's getting the best out of those players in those spaces. The question becomes, when you've got a new crop of guys in there that you haven't coached through the minor leagues, there's going to be turnover, as there is turnover every year. Is he still going to be able to perform and get that same level and quality out of folks? I have confidence that he would, but I think that's still an open question. And if I'm Ken Holland, this is my last coaching decision. Right? Like, if this doesn't work, I'm done as the GM. And if you're Ken Holland right now, do you want to bet your career future on what is essentially an unproven guy at the NHL level? It just gives me pause. And so while I agree with you guys that he should be the guy, I'm not 100% convinced, even if they make the playoffs, and particularly if they're out quickly in round one again, if he will be the guy, just because of the pressures associated with, Ken Holland. And this is his last coach.
All right. Well, I guess we will see in the next couple of weeks here whether or not he's able to put that X beside the Oilers' name as they qualify for the playoffs. We will find out.
What team would you guys rather play? The Kings or Vegas?
Kings, for sure.
Yeah, Jordan?
I think I would flip a coin. I think they're both playing at about the same place right now. The Kings have fallen off a lot, and I've enjoyed watching the Oilers play them in the last two times. It's been competitive games, but I think the Oilers are well matched against them. They don't have Drew Doughty now.
And they don't have Doughty. Yeah.
So, well, and I just don't think that the Vegas team that's playing right now in the regular season is the Vegas team you're going to face in the playoffs. Like, everyone comes off a long-term IR.
Yeah.
Their caps is goes out the window. They're like 20 million over the cap. That's a joke, but like they've done what Tampa Bay did last year. So
yeah, but they don't have the chemistry Tampa Bay had, so we'll see.
That's fair.
As I say, we will find out soon enough who will see the Oilers play against, where they will finish in the standings. We will soon have conversations about awards and about reviewing how the season has gone. We will get to all of that. For now, that is topic 1.
Topic 2 this week is brought to us by Ellipses Thinking. Ellipses Thinking is the newest podcast from the Ordinary Podcasting Network. Host Greg Deller-Coltman shares his conversations with people actively engaged in their own creative adventures, those who identify as artists, and those who choose to experience life through an artistic lens. They shed light on relationships that shape and inspire us as we meet the challenges, discoveries, and learnings we make when we courageously invite our creative spirit forth. The first 2 episodes of Ellipses Thinking drop this Friday, March 11th. You can subscribe or follow anywhere you get your podcasts.
All right, let's get to topic 2 here. We are talking about getting to the playoffs in topic 1 for the NHL. The playoffs are well underway in the NBA. We talked a little bit last week, Braydon, about some, let's call them controversial or inflammatory hot takes from guys like Shaq about whether or not the Raptors really had what it takes to go up against MVP candidate Joel Embiid and the 76ers. We've seen them play now 1 game. They are trailing Philly 1-0 in that series. But the biggest news, obviously, right now is that the Raptors are facing some serious injuries moving into game 2 and potentially the rest of the series. Rookie of the Year candidate Barnes will not probably play in the next matchup. I mean, he's been considered, it's probably unlikely, I think was the term that Coach Nurse used. So obviously not ruled out completely, but at this point, I think very unlikely. They play tomorrow.
Monday.
They play Monday, and then they play again Wednesday, and the series could be really swung here in the next 2 games. What were your impressions of the 131-111 loss to start the series? And now that you know some of these injuries that the Raptors are facing, how are you feeling as a Raptors fan here in the early part of round 1?
Well, if you look back at the history of the Toronto Raptors in the playoffs, I think 5 of the 6 times they've been in the playoffs, first game, they've lost. Even the year that they played and won championship in 2019, they lost the Orlando Magic in the first game. So I'm used to this. I'm comfortable knowing that there's a long series ahead. They did get thumped. They got absolutely thumped by Philly, but Philly had a lot of energy, having played the Raptors in the playoffs before and facing heartbreak against this team before. So going in, they had a lot going for them. And I think that Nick Nurse and this team, you heard Thaddeus Young talk about just how strong their scouting are for these guys. You look at the stats that first game, James Harden was kept to 22 points, Joel Embiid to 19. And this is the guy who's leading the league in scoring. And he's kept to 19 points in this game. They had a surprising outing from their sophomore Tyrese Maxey. I think he might be a rookie actually, but 38 points. I think that's like season high points for this guy. So that's not something I think that we should be expecting moving forward. But the loss of Scotty Barnes is going to be huge for this team. He is a very important factor for the vehicle that is the structure of what Nick Nurse does for this team. But we're going to have bigger performances from Pascal Siakam. OG Anunoby's got to step up. We got to see the all-star that Fred VanVleet is moving forward here. I think that we will. I don't think that we're going to see the sweep that Shaq thinks that we're going to see from this series. I think that there's still a lot of life left in this Toronto Raptors team in this first round.
Elliott?
Yeah, I think the concerning thing for me is that going into this series, it really felt like if there was one advantage Toronto had, it was on defense, and they gave up 131 points tonight. So, Braydon did a good job of articulating some outliers. I mean, Harris had 26 points too. Maxey had 38 points in 38 minutes, which is insane.
Ridiculous.
So those may just be outliers, and hopefully they are. But I think my initial concern here is they didn't lose, 101-98 or something like that, that this was a blowout and the strongest part of their team wasn't able to deliver. And so that would be my concern as a Raptors fan moving forward.
The nice thing on the score sheet too, we don't always see, is that they usually keep the rotations pretty tight. You'll see maybe 6-7 guys in the entire game. They had every single guy on their roster with a statistic in the first game of the playoffs, and many of these guys have never played in the NBA playoffs. So I think there's something said just to get everybody accustomed into the feel of the game. I think we're going to see a very different outcome in game 2.
So we'll leave the Raptors for a second here. I know you and Christian spent some time sort of doing some preview of the playoffs and expectations and things as you looked at what was going on around the league. When you look at this first round, obviously everyone's only played one game so far, so there's not a lot of data, let's say, to go through. But what are the big storylines that you see emerging already as far as what you're either surprised by or sort of the status quo sort of coming through for you when you look at this playoffs?
I think
what intrigues you?
Yeah, the most fun right now, and when we saw it in the game Sunday, was the Boston. Well, I shouldn't even say the Boston Celtics. I should say the Boston Celtics fans versus Kyrie Irving. I think that's going to be a storyline that we see. Obviously, he having left Boston in unceremonious fashion, returning, having all of this history of the season, not playing all of the home games in Brooklyn, being unvaccinated. If this Brooklyn team ends up facing Toronto, he won't be allowed to play again. So there's even further storylines involving him. But it's unruly what's going on. And this Boston Celtics team pulled out a last-minute buzzer beater. Jason Tatum with a spinorama on Kyrie Irving winning the game. And that's only game 1. So that's, again, that's going to be a lot of fun to see just how intense and heated that series gets. Another interesting one, I think, to follow is going to be the Timberwolves and Grizzlies, 2 teams that haven't been in the NBA playoffs in quite some time, both with some high-flying prospects that they picked up in drafts from previous years. Obviously, Ja Morant is leading this Grizzlies team into the next generation of the NBA. And Anthony Edwards, Karl Anthony Towns with Minnesota Timberwolves, who just snuck in with the play-in tournament. I think this play-in tournament is a lot of fun. I think there's something to it that adds the element from what the March Madness tournament has of one-off games that mean a lot more to the team and to the playoff tournament as a whole. What else? I think it was kind of heartbreaking to see the Cavaliers lose and not make it into the playoffs. They obviously had a very, very strong season with their young players, but the Hawks snuck in, and they're gonna get swept. However, the Heat have it locked up, I think, until the Eastern Conference.
Well, I guess we'll see. Elliott, any other thoughts on the NBA playoffs for you when you look at this? I mean, Braydon mentioned the great little spin move there by Tatum at the end of the Celtics game, and yes, he was technically making the move on Kyrie Irving, but go watch the replay and find out who was really supposed to be covering him as Mr. Kevin Durant just stood there and watched it all happen. That was very awkward.
Yeah, that was my impression of that situation as well, Jordan. And I'm glad you mentioned that. The series I'm looking at is definitely the Bucks and Bulls, just because I love the Bucks. And another stalwart defensive effort from them. I like a good defensive team, and I'm all in on the Bucks this year. If the Raptors,
and that could turn into a really cool rivalry. I think just geographically, those cities are very, very close to one another. So,
you think?
I think so. I haven't been there, but I think so. Looking on a map, I think they're close.
All right.
From
All right.
finger
Well,
to finger, they're much closer than we are here.
I'll copy that. All right. I'm glad that we use such detailed and precise measurement implements as our
Finger
fingers.
meters.
It's
Finger
sports
meters.
and geography here at Hat Trick Sports.
All right. Well, let's leave it there. That's topic 2. Hey, if you're a fan of Hat Trick Sports, then I promise you are going to love the Backyard Basketball Podcast. Hat Trick's very own Braydon Coltman sits down every Wednesday with his best bud, Christian Steck. And together, they break down all the news, rumors, transactions from around the basketball world. Whether it's the NBA or college hoops, these two guys love talking basketball, and you are going to love listening every Wednesday on the Backyard Basketball Podcast. All right, it is that time of the week where we turn the mic over to Elliott to give us our Padres update. Before I do, Elliott, I just wanted to make a quick note here. Something came up and I was very intrigued by it. I'm sure that you are as well. Obviously, good start to the season so far for your beloved Padres. They win on Sunday, but in doing so, they also broke another MLB record, their second record-breaking event of the season so far. We talked earlier in the season how they had back-to-back no-hitters, which wasn't an MLB record. They now, after going 9 error-free innings against the Braves on Saturday, the Padres have broken the Major League Baseball's record and became the first team in baseball history to have no errors in their first 11 games of the season. So 11 games in, they have yet to give up an error, which is probably the dumbest statistic in baseball, because to commit an error, you actually have to have tried to get the ball and missed. Whereas if you just let it fall, you don't get penalized. So I've never understood or liked the error as a rule. However, the Padres are a big fan of it because it's put them in the record books one more time. Let's turn it over to our diehard San Diego Padres fan here, Elliott. 11 games in, how you feeling?
Well, I think that's an excellent place to start, Jordan, because I think it really articulates what I wanted to highlight this week about the Padres, and that is the Bob Melvin experience. Bob Melvin is now the new manager that's come in to manage the Padres this year, taking over after what's been a calamity of messiness in terms of managers in previous years. Of course, I don't know much about that because I've only been a fan for about 4 weeks or so. But this is the Bob Melvin experience. This is what you expected when you get a professional in a manager role. He came from the Oakland A's and has really, professionalized the dugout. And that's the type of defense that he's been preaching from the start. And if the Padres are going to have success, like I've said all year, given all of my experience and knowledge of this team in this league, they're going to be a pitch and catch team. They're going to win games 2-1 like they did today, 3-2, because they just don't have the bats. And with Tatis out, this is just the way that they're going to have to play to have success. The other thing I want to highlight, another record that occurred this week, opening day, Manny Machado went 5 for 6, 5 hits on opening day. The first Padre to do that in some 20 years, and only the fourth guy to do it at home. And, Manny Machado had not had a great start to the season in the first 2 series, but really came out and did something pretty spectacular. So my hat's off to him this week. Look, it's been a mixed bag. They play in the toughest division in the league. San Francisco did give them a run for the money, but they did get a win out of San Francisco in that series. And then obviously going 2-2 with the Braves, probably at home, probably not the result that they wanted. But 6-5 without your best player and playing error-free baseball with and pitching, the starting pitching being what everyone said it had the potential to be. As a Padres fan, I'm pretty happy. I'm pretty excited.
Just speaking of records here, Darvish, who's had a up and down start to the season after having a tough outing a couple weeks ago, or a couple days ago, where he was pulled after the second inning, but he wins this game against the Braves, and his 4th strikeout of the day was registered as his 16th hundred of his career, with just 1,302 innings pitched. So Darvish is the fastest pitcher to 1,600 Ks by innings pitched. No pitcher has reached that milestone in fewer than 1,350 innings. So very, very impressive for Darvish to get to 1,600 strikeouts. Braydon, I know that for you,
Yeah.
very quickly, this season is turning for you. I know you started the season as a Blue Jays fan, but how quickly are you finding space on the Padres bandwagon to sit your butt down?
Why the fuck are we talking about the Padres? I like the fact that what did Elliott say? He said professionalize the dugout. I think we need to put that on a t-shirt. I couldn't believe that he could hold a straight face the entire time that he was giving off random statistics about professionalizing the dugout. Another impressive statistic on opening weekend was that of Vladimir Guerrero Jr., who went 4 for 4, 3 home runs and a double in one game. I think that's more impressive and much more captivating and deserving of holding my attention in the baseball season. But as I was saying before, if people are interested for some reason in watching the Padres, you can find them on TSN channels later into the evening as they play. I guess, it would be like a 7:00 game. You can catch the Padres on TSN here in Canada.
That's the great thing about being a Padres fan that I've just discovered. You can watch.
You must love the
Jays game ends, and then you can go right into the Padres game. That's that's right after that, because the time zones just line up perfectly.
So I want to ask you, Jordan. How about you? I mean, this is the most I've ever heard you talk about baseball, let alone statistics of pitchers. What is it to you about the Padres that just keeps you coming back for more?
Well, I just like to support my friends and family's passions. And I think that for me, the biggest thing is that when someone I care about, loves a team, even if I'm personally not interested, I feel like I owe it to them to kind of invest some of my energy and time. And I feel like that's what I've done here for the Padres, my good friend, Elliott. I mean, he has been, really, truly swept away by, this Padres season so far. And I'm really inspired and moved by it, frankly.
Is it because you're a mascot and you have a thing for the friar, the monk mascot? Have you guys seen this thing? It looks like a bizarre Disney. It looks like a Disneyland mascot.
Oh, I haven't seen that yet, but that there you go. You've got me excited again. So I'm going to have to go Google that later. Before we go here, I do think that we need to just take one moment in the baseball conversation to, we're not doing hats off this week, but let's tip our hats all together here to Buck Martinez, the broadcaster for the Blue Jays, who announced this weekend that he has been diagnosed with cancer and is stepping away from the broadcast booth. Anyone who has listened to Blue Jays broadcasts here in Canada knows Buck Martinez's voice. It's iconic. He is certainly going to be missed in the booth and certainly missed on the Sportsnet broadcasts, but we wish him and all of his family around him well. We hope he gets better soon and quickly. And just hope that, on behalf of all Blue Jays fans and all baseball fans in Canada, we want him to know that we've got his back, we're supporting him, and hope that it goes well for him, because it's a horrible thing to have to deal with, and we will obviously miss his voice on those broadcasts. But yeah, as he fights cancer, we want to stand with him.
And in the same breath, I think it's important to recognize that of Jamie Campbell, who isn't stepping away from the broadcast. That's right, but it was also acknowledged that he has been battling leukemia, Hodgkin's disease, and he has begun treatment, but he will be staying with the broadcast in an effort to show people that the disease is manageable, curable, and you can live a very healthy and active life moving forward with it.
So our hats go off to both of those two wonderful gentlemen. Our hats go off to the Padres and the Blue Jays and to all of their fans. Whatever bandwagon you find yourself on this weekend, we hope that there is plenty of room for others to join you. We thank you, as always, for listening to us ramble on about the things we care about, and we want to wish you and your kind well. Please follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. If you don't already, please subscribe. You can do that anywhere you get your podcasts. Thank you, Elliott. Thank you, Braydon, as always. And that's hat trick. Hat Trick is a member of the Ordinary Podcasting Network. It's produced every week by Jordan Dowler Coltman and Braydon Dowler Coltman. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thanks for listening.
Didn't even get to Mackenzie Gore in his first ever start. Number one prospect in the Padres.
The Ordinary Podcasting Network wishes to acknowledge that the lands on which our conversations take place include Treaty 6 territory, the traditional meeting ground and home for many Indigenous peoples, including the Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, and the Nakota Sioux peoples, as well as the unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations.
We acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for generations. And we extend our appreciation for the opportunity to live, create, and share stories on these territories.
The Ordinary Podcasting Network intends to engage in conversations and dialogue which acknowledge that reconciliation is not a destination, but a journey, and that we remain committed to practicing our craft in a decolonized space.